Welcome to Concussion Talk Podcast. I'm Nick Mercer. I write the blog Concussion Talk, www.concussiontalk.com. This is episode 36 of Concussion Talk Podcast, and I'm talking to Katie Mitchell. And Katie, can you introduce yourself and say, where you work, what you do your PhD in? Good.
So my name is Katie Mitchell, and I'm doing my doctorate at Wilfrid Laurier University in Waterloo, Ontario. It's a blend of neuroscience, biomechanics, and motor control. I also work part-time as a physiotherapist and athletic therapist, and I work with sports teams like rugby and sledge hockey.
Cool. Oh, well, I'll let listeners know right now that we're having some sound issues, but Katie's doing a remarkable job of slowing down her. I don't know how you could tell your speech was not, your sound was not good then, but that was impressive. Anyway, so hopefully there's no big problems. Anyway, I'll get talking before this sound goes all haywire. But so I'm gonna ask Katie. Katie, what's your PhD in? What are you looking at specifically?
So I'm focusing on vestibular ocular function across sort of the athlete spectrum. And so that includes looking at like youth to young adults, sort of recreational to elite, and then also like with and without concussion injuries. Because that's kind of a given, is that in sort of an athlete population, you're going to find a lot of them will report a history of concussion. And then as well, like even in the recreational level, we find a lot of people still sustain concussions in that way as well. So what it basically is, like I said, a blend of like neuroscience and biomechanics and motor control. And we sort of look at how individuals utilize their sensory systems to navigate an environment and maintain their balance control. So sort of how we utilize vision, for example, and how our vestibular system helps orient us to our environment, how we utilize sort of optic variables. So, for example, like on a sports field, like how you would see your goal, how you would see sort of like the opponent as well as your teammates, like whether you're receiving like a ball, for example. So a lot of that kind of all combines together. I sort of think of it as that head on a swivel mechanism in sport. And when we get athletes with concussion, I find that that's sort of one of the final phases of rehab, is sort of that integration of all those sensory systems to really fine tune their performance.
That sounds really complex. And actually, I just mentioned to you earlier that I didn't really know how it mentioned my double vision to you, but now that it's got me thinking, because you said balance, and because I have my balance issues, my left side especially, but I have double vision. So like, is there like, so like, I know like for me walking downstairs and upstairs, well that's just balance issue stuff. But how is that like my walking? Do you think is there like a relation between my double vision and my walking stability, balance?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. So basically, like when you have double vision or diplopia, it's when sort of the two retinal images are mismatched. Yeah. So you're getting two different sort of stimuli to each eye. And so that sort of creates a disparity in like your depth perception. It sort of gives you this. So like the two ways we utilize vision is like we use it for perception as well as just recognition of things. So you can see like shapes, colors, that kind of thing, but we also perceive motion and also perceive like the differences in say like the height of something, or as you're going down a stair, you actually perceive like the depth of that stair. But if you're getting like sort of a disparity between both with the information to both eyes, then it creates again like that sort of mixed message, and you actually perceive it as being different than it maybe is. Yeah. And that's when you lose balance.
Right. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So actually, so why did you just find the brain fascinating, interesting, or was there a reason that you picked? Because you did your undergrad in kinesiology, right?
Yep.
So why did you pick concussion brain injury is your area for study for your PhD.
So when I started my career, I was very much like an on-field, in-clinic. It wasn't so much into research at the time. And even in my undergrad, I worked with the varsity men's rugby team at Wilfrid Laurier, and I worked with women's hockey as well in the CIS. And I just saw like a ton of injuries. And at that time, that was probably over a decade ago, we didn't have really any protocols in place. We'd kind of just be sitting there, scratching our heads, not really sure what to do. We just kind of let an athlete, do their thing and let them heal.
Yeah.
Sometimes they didn't. We didn't really have any good measures or tests to be able
the sound's going in.
whether a player could or could not play. Say like.
Okay, now.
Is that working again?
Now I think you got it. I think good. You sounded good then.
Okay.
So you can just kick where left off.
Yeah, so basically back then it was kind of that you'd take 7 days off of your sport and then basically you would return, not really sure if you were symptom free, that's great. But we really didn't have a lot of answers at that time. And so it always was sort of a question I had clinically. And then as time went on, I've really worked with rugby pretty much every year since. And it's a pretty high risk sport for that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So we see a lot of head injuries just with the amount of contact there is and like lack of equipment, obviously. But throughout my different degrees, I did athletic therapy first, and I worked a lot of football. I, again, saw a ton of injuries there, even like things like wrestling and stuff as well. And then I got into my physical therapy program at Queen's, and we did like neuroanatomy and really dug deep into neuroscience in some of those courses. And so it really sort of stimulated my interest in the brain. And again, sort of raised those questions that I had from previous years working in sport. And then it sort of led me down the path of when I got into private practice. Again, I just had these burning questions, and I ended up meeting my advisor, Michael Cinelli at Laurier. And so from there, we first meeting, we pretty much sat down.
Okay, the sounds are going to whack you again. But, okay.
I get cut off again.
Now you're good. Now go. Go quick.
Okay. So yeah, basically, after I'd met with my advisor, my current advisor, we pretty much devised my planned PhD from there. So it was really never something I originally sought out to do. It just sort of kind of came together.
Okay, the sound was a bit weird there, but I think you can keep going. We'll get through this. Okay. I think you keep going. So Candy, okay, so I'll ask you a question now. Let's see if we can,
Okay.
okay, so Mitch asked before about my double vision and balance, and you described a bit of what the visuomotor system does also in your introduction just to your work. But so what does it do for people just in general? What does the visuomotor system or complex, whatever you want to call it, what does it do for people, for the general public who have not been concussed? What's his role in the body?
So we utilize the visual system to produce movement. So as we navigate through any environment, for example, like a growth,
Okay,
right? So vision sort of guides that movement.
Okay. So what do you look for in an athlete who's already recovering from concussion? What do you look for in them? For their when you assess them, what do you assess? Oh, and I think we're losing contact. And I'll just talk until I think Katie's back. And here's her laugh. Okay, so she's back. So, Katie, do you have a question?
I do not.
Okay. Saying what do you look for in athletes? What do you assess when you're assessing athletes, either for your research or for your practice? What do you assess when they're recovering from concussion?
So typically in my research, I look at asymptomatic individuals or athletes. So they're not reporting any symptoms at the time of testing them. So we do a screen, or I do a screen of like the VOM screen, so the vestibulo-ocular motor screen. And first, that's just to help me determine, how their eyes actually can move, how their vestibular system is working, whether they're actually getting symptoms with just that screening test. And then we
Okay.
utilize
okay.
It's
breaking up a lot. Okay, now we'll try again. Okay.
I know.
Okay, now we'll get
this. Breaking up more than it did.
Yeah, this will be a fun sounding podcast. People get a good adventure going to listen to this one. So.
So yeah, what I was getting to there is we assess balance, but in a dynamic way.
Okay.
So we've utilized in a previous study, and I'm waiting to get this kind of published, but we've utilized a fit light system. And athletes have to respond to lights on the floor with their foot.
Oh, yeah.
And while they're standing on one leg, for example. So it's pretty challenging. And
they'll hop, or there's point out leg. Now you're going again. But we're almost, the questions are, okay, are you back? Yes. No? Yes? I don't know. Using a fit life system, athletes staying 1 foot, and they have to point out the floor. If they're staying 1 foot last, or if they have to hop or point with the other leg. I don't know if
they're just reaching with their foot.
Okay, with which foot though? Like with the foot that's down or the foot that's?
We switch feet, so it's the one that's in. Like they basically stand on 1 foot and they have 1 foot in the air.
Okay,
and then,
gotcha.
Hover over the lights on the floor as they turn them off.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, so.
So they have to utilize their vision to then see the light and then respond to it on the floor.
This kind of like I was in last week. I was in or last week, 2 weeks ago, or last week. Yeah, 2 weeks ago. I did this. I went to this med student, like being a not test subject, but like a teaching person, like a teaching patient. What's it called? Standard patient. What they called it at Memorial University. Anyway, so I just telling them what my problems were, and they had to try to diagnose it. So they gave me the finger in front of the nose. They wanted to test the neurologist because I was in neurology area. So they held a finger up in front of me, and they touched my nose, and then touched their hand with the finger. Do that? You can see me now. I touched my nose with my index finger, then reach out and touch their finger. Do that type of thing? You can. I don't know if you can read. Sure. Okay, so I can do. I do this, like that. I can't tell if she's reacting or not. No.
Oh yeah, so that's like a coordination test.
Yeah.
Yeah,
okay.
So that's like a visual kind of coordination. That's more of a cerebellar type task. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So what do you look for, like when people are recovering? You think, I don't know, enough or well from concussions? How should they? Just faster movements, faster recognition of lights and stuff, and more balance in general, or did you measure that?
Yeah, so we use a force platform to measure the forces under their foot. So we use a Nintendo Wii board actually that we have programmed to be a force plate. And so as they're standing on it, we can actually quantify their balance control. So that's where we get our objective measure. So they're responding to lights, and then we can kind of get a measure of under the foot that's on the board, of how well they're able to control that motion and the movement as they're sort of reaching controls. And we like to see the
Yeah, I thought I had there, but we kind of lost you there for a bit, but for a second, but I think you're... that was actually all my questions, but I think, and this is obviously a bit tougher with the sound cutting out, but yes, but it's gonna be something. Oh, yeah, the neuro-optometry thing you're saying, there's some areas in that, things in that you're interested in, like just interesting areas of that to explore.
Yeah, and that's sort of in the future directions of what my PhD research is heading towards. We do a lot of work with the University of Waterloo, neuro-optometry, and hoping to kind of collaborate with them in the future to do some really interesting work. But it's still kind of in the works of planning and sort of setting up those studies. So maybe look for those results next year.
Yeah.
But we should be publishing the results from our FitLight study. We did it with a youth hockey academy a little over a year ago.
Okay. Yeah, I'm hoping to get some, actually do some the eye trainings for eye training with an optometrist here. And so I don't know if the neuro, as you, when I last podcast, or two podcasts ago actually, I talked to your concussion clinic. There's Dr. Mona Yubi. She's a neuro-optometrist or optometrist. She does concussions in the York Region Concussion Clinic. So we were talking briefly then. So yeah. So those, I mean, this is a bit difficult to interview, but I think hopefully people will get a lot out of this, what they heard. And is there anything else that you find that you would like to? Hopefully you can see it because that sound cutting out, but that you find interesting about your research that's promising.
Sorry, I missed a bunch of that.
Oh yeah, no, I kind of mumbled, but anyway, I mumbled it there anyway. But is there anything about anything that you find promising about your research towards finding like some way to help athletes recover from concussion?
Yeah, so that's again like the directions we're heading in is more towards again the more visual motor tasks, getting like more advanced testing. And this applies directly to my patients in my clinical practice as well. It's not just with the like athletes that I work with in my studies. Like I have regular
1 second. 1 second. Okay, I think.
The same.
Okay, now a lot of the same. A lot of the same. Yeah. Okay. Try it again. Sorry, a lot of the same people with a lot of the same.
Yeah, so I was saying with just patients in my clinical practice, I can kind of assess their balance just like by kind of teasing out different sensory systems.
Right.
If they're a little more visually kind of impaired, I guess, we just remove vision. We close the eyes. I get them to do head motion instead and test the vestibular system a little closer. Or we sort of manipulate the somatosensory system and use like foam, for example, or, different foot positions. So the future of my research is really interesting. And because of the findings we've gotten with the previous studies, we found that the balance control was poor, I guess, in the athletes with a history of concussion. So it wasn't even just recently concussed. It was like previous history in the last couple of years. They're just less, they're less anticipatory with their movement, and they're a little bit
Okay, that was actually good, but now I'm losing you a bit. I want to ask you another question, but hopefully you can get this. Are you back? Yeah, okay, so they're less anticipatory with their movement, but can you even hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. So you're saying that athletes who have previous concussions are less anticipatory with their movement, but, and then you kind of cut out. And now I don't know
Sorry.
if you're saying that previously concussed athletes are less anticipatory with their movements, but
Yeah, so during the fit light task where we had them reacting to lights on the floor, they were a little bit slower
yeah,
than the control athletes. And I was in like a youth hockey academy, very elite training level.
yeah,
A lot of these kids were playing hockey. So it just kind of indicated that we need to do a little bit more advanced either rehab or potentially fine tuning of those systems to kind of sharpen them a little bit better
okay,
when we're returning to play. So it's kind of those advanced phases of rehab that sort of we overlook because they no longer have symptoms that they're reporting. But there are sort of
uh-oh, okay, yeah, okay, 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 so the kids are, they're lead level, and you gotta work on that, being able to get back faster to doing, but then we lost you there.
Okay, so I'll go over through it again.
Sorry.
No, so basically, what my research I'm hoping to do, anyways, is for these sort of latter stages of the return to play, return to work processes. I'd like to do more integrated assessment to sort of find these lingering deficits that aren't necessarily in symptomatic patients. They're not something that they can even notice themselves sometimes, but if you sort of test it in more advanced measures, then we can sort of tease these things out.
Right. Okay, and actually, I'll see if we get this last question in here, but I noticed on your webpage for Thrive NeuroSport.ca that you are generally do orthopedic or have done orthopedic physiotherapy.
Yeah,
But how?
yeah.
How would you like take this to that another? Would you like to either bring this concussion research to your own practice or new practice, or how do you
definitely.
think?
Yeah, I do see a lot of concussion patients, everyday people to athletes. A lot of them do have vestibular ocular problems. And I don't work alone with these athletes. I definitely refer to neuro-optometry, and I'll screen a lot of these things because I understand what they are, but I
Yeah,
don't go outside of my scope
you don't
necessarily with
diagnose.
treating
Yeah,
these kind of
yeah,
patients. Yeah. So I definitely try to like have a team of practitioners involved, and I try not to make suggestions without having that intervention with the neuro-optometrist. I think that's a big thing too, is making sure that if you screen something in a patient and you see that potentially, maybe one eye is even deviating away from the other one, when they bring like
yeah.
their finger towards their nose, that's something that needs to be screened and further assessed by a different practitioner. So there are certain things that I do, but there's a lot that is sort of a team approach as well.
Okay, great. So that's hopefully the sound is going to keep, but that was great. That was very very interesting, and I mean definitely I can see definitely how it relates to my never concussion, my brain injury, and my challenges and stuff. So I definitely see how it relates, and I can see how it would definitely relate to anyone who's just had a concussion or is recovering, trying to get back to sport or just life, walking around and going to school or work or whatever. Just managing life in any sort of social environment. So, yeah. So thank you very much, and a challenging podcast, but I think we did good work. So thank you, Katie.
Oh, thank you for having me.
I apologize again for the audio, but thank you for sticking through it, and thank you to Katie Mitchell. Check out our website at thriveneurosport.ca, and please check out my website at www.concussiontalk.com. Thank you again for listening, and I hope you listen again next time. As always, music at the beginning of this podcast is by Ben Sound, www.bensound.com.